Sometimes we forget why we're here. It's easy to fall off track. These help us remember.
These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Growing up I had a dream, something no one else could see. Tell me what it means when your faith is falling beneath your knees and you can't breathe. Everything you see reminds you of what you're not or something you won't be. You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business. Not because they wanna do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shame. And that's the reason I'm staying up late, trying to find a way to escape the stereotypes this day and age is making me feel like the only way I'll be happy is getting signed to a label and making money through rapping. I wanna share my emotion because this world is attacking the very principle of life that lets the people be happy. If you don't have a reason to breathe, why even live? These battle scars are impressions of everything that it is.
Don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Now, if I had a voice that reached 100 million people, I'd tell them there's a reason that we're all created equal. Cause some decide to be great and some decide a sequel to an average person's life is simply what they want to be. So you make your decision, all I know is what I'm given. Won't define the life I lead or the way I dwell in existence. I've seen a greater image on the walls of where I'm living, and the words twisted and scripted remind me of something written. Faith is a gift that is given down to the people. If one believes it, one receives it. It's given if it is needed. Don't ever think you're trapped in a life that you never wanted. Your options are infinite, that's some mathematical logic. I'm not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers and these battle scars on my church. Not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers, these battle scars on my church.
Don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Hey there, how are you guys doing? One of these days I have to change that opening sequence with the Karen Ann Harlos to make the background where it's not black on one areas and then fades to this gray. It was before things were in 1280. So you can tell that I've been doing this for a while. I hope you guys are doing well. If I seem a little... I don't even know the word to use, stringy, like my hair feels stringy, I feel stringy. I had medical procedure earlier today where I was put out, and my mind does not recover quickly from that. So I'm still a little delulu might not be the right word, but Lulu. Maybe some of you might think Delulu is the right word, but I'm not exactly entirely myself. And tomorrow I am flying out to DC for the Rage Against... I just noticed I was swiveling back and forth. To the Rage Against the War Machine rally. I'm not staying the next day for the fake Trump rally that we're pretending it's not a Trump rally promoted by the LP, but we all know damn well it's a Trump rally being promoted by the LP. So I'm not staying for that for lots of reasons. A, I don't go to Trump rallies. And B, unfortunately, and I pray this doesn't happen, I ain't going to be anywhere near another January 6th. That's all I'm going to tell you. My opinion on that event notwithstanding, I don't want to be anywhere near that. And again, prayers for a smooth day with no Fed issues, okay? But the feds are gonna Fed. If you're wondering what this little flickering thing is, I'm going to show you because I see it on my screen, and I would wonder what it is. Of course, this is the pink flame of liberty, so you expect to see some flames. This is an antique Statue of Liberty lamp. I think I might actually put this up in the guest bedroom, but I just love it so much, or I'll put it on a stand here so that you guys can actually see it, because just seeing that little fire thing isn't really helping. I've got a stand right here. Let's see if I can make it so that it's a little bit more visible. It's a tiny bit more visible. You can at least see that it's the Statue of Liberty. Also, last stream, people were making fun of Ben Shapiro's side shots that he does so much of, which really don't work that well. So just to be funny, I decided to do this. So hello, look, I'm doing a Ben Shapiro. I need to scoot over a little. Was those my glasses? Yeah. I'm doing a Ben Shapiro, so you can see me from the side now. But you can also see the side of my studio where I've got more Statue of Liberty, and I got this extra light that's not working out so well, and Mr. Rooster, and some fake hair, and all kinds of things. So you get to see the other side of my studio. So maybe we'll do some switching back and forth like this. I need to find a better place for this little side camera. Hi. How you doing? Anyway, let's switch back. Let me figure out how to do that. There, now we're back to normal. But I've got all these little webcams that I could just set up and do some side shots. So let's do the YouTuber stuff, and we'll get right into the subject matter. Remember, I'm saving personal comments, except for the few I just did, personal questions to the end, because I got asked to freaking get to the point, and people are correct. All right, so first of all, please, new, returning, whatever you might be, hit the subscribe button. I truly, truly appreciate it. And what it does, if you really want to know practically what subscribing does, even if you don't use notifications, it lets YouTube know who's watching things, and it boosts it in the algorithm. Listen, we'll get to this next. I don't make money off of YouTube ads. I'm not going to say I don't make anything, but when I say I don't make money off of YouTube ads, I make like $2 a month off of YouTube ads. I'm not asking you to subscribe or to boost the algorithm for that. I am asking you to do it so that we can spread libertarian ideas. Okay? And that's also why I'd like you to share it to your non-libertarian friends. Only really big creators or people with paid sponsorships make money off of YouTube ads. That is what was so funny about 2021, when they're all freaking out. She's got a monetized YouTube channel. It's like making 60 cents a month. But we'll get to how I actually do make some money in one moment. Next, you can please follow me on Twitter. Usually it's interesting, and it's Karen Ann Harlos, my full name on there. And to get to the filthy lucre part, here's where I do need your help. I would appreciate it if you can, and we have tiers from $1 up, to support me on Patreon. Big surprise, I want a term without any big hoopla, but to me, my most prized possession is my integrity. And I am always going to do what I believe is right. Now, I can be wrong about that. There are things in the past I did, nothing big, nothing that you'd probably even know about, that I thought was right at the time and then later changed my mind, which shows I have an open mind. But at the time, when it's go time, when it's decision time, I do what is right, no matter what. Though the sky may fall, do what is right. I am the typical hard deontologist. And I'm going through a rough time. Not like personally, emotionally like that. I mean, obviously, there's some emotions involved, but you guys can tell I'm pretty good. But just in general, lost quite a few patrons, because when you aren't part of a cult anymore, and not that, and I use that word hyperbolically, because there are still people in a particular faction that I admire, that I'm still very good friends with, that I think are great people. But there is a small segment of them that are very influential, and it is very, very cultic. You get love bombed, and if you stray the slightest from the path, ooh boy, do you get shunned, just like the Amish. So, if you appreciate what I'm doing, even when you don't agree, if you appreciate that I'm the type of person that's going to do what is right, I would appreciate your support at patreon.com/Pink Flame of Liberty. I almost missaid that because, again, I'm still got a little of that anesthesia going through my system. We're going to get now right to the subject. Let's do the prelude as to where this came from. I did a show regarding, kind of rebutting, Dave Smith's comment about open borders, and he didn't call it ideological possession. I think he called it ideological capture, and I kept using the two terms interchangeably, but I think you know what I meant. And I read on that show, which I'll say I'll put up in the upper bar, but I won't. Just look for it. It's like 4 shows down. I say reacting to Dave Smith's elephant hurl, I think is what it's called. If you search for elephant hurl, you will find it. So surprising to me that people have never heard that term before. I've grown up with that term forever, an elephant hurl. It's like when you're in a debate and you know the other person has limited time, rather than just doing bite-sized chunks, you just hurl an elephant at them. It's almost it's kind of related to a gish gallop, but it's different. A gish gallop is where you throw like 1,000 different small facts that could take you maybe 5 minutes to say and would take the person 5 days to rebut. Instead, what an elephant hurl is, you just put this big loaded presupposition, you just hurl it at them and try to squish them with it. So if you've never heard those terms before, maybe because I grew up in the debate community, I don't want to say grew up, but like I've been in the debate community a long time. I owned a theological debate forum for over a decade. I've debated all over the world. I taught a course, it wasn't a course, I taught a class out of a course on comparative religions. I've been in, it's mostly written debates, but like I cut my teeth on debating, so I kind of know debate terms. One day we're going to do a show on how most people have no frickin' idea what the no true Scotsman fallacy is, because most people have a fallacious use of that fallacy, just so that you know. But in responding to Dave Smith, I read you an article by Tom Knapp called Against Stockholm Libertarianism. And to my great pleasure and surprise, at the end he quoted me in a recent encounter we had about an old article that used to be on 1776.net. I believe it was by L. Neil Smith. Tom, if you're watching this and you actually wrote it, I apologize, but I think L. Neil Smith wrote it. And it's called, let me put on my old lady glasses because I'm an old lady. Even with the pink hair, still an old lady. He entitled it Blast from the Past, because this article was written in 2010. And we're going to have to give you some context for some of you as to what was going on in the party in 2010. Without a net. Compromise versus calculation. Now let me tell you, I haven't read this article in about 5 years. So I may end up disagreeing with parts of it. Parts of it may actually refute points I've said before, and I'll change my mind because I do things like that because I'm not ideologically captured. But probably not. But I will say that Tom Knapp's Against Stockholm Libertarianism, this article, and an article written by Stefan Kinsella, which I think will also do it. I've done shows on it before, but I think every so often I should just read it again, are what Tom Kinsella's articles what made me an anarchist. That was what pushed me over the edge. Of course, there was a lot of people leading me along the way, but that article pushed me over the edge. But in my journey just to radicalism, while I was still a minarchist, Tom Knapp's article Against Stockholm Libertarianism and this Without a Net compromise versus calculation turned me into a radical. So I went from a very moderate, well, first I went from a constitutionalist, believe it or not, a Republican constitutionalist, to a moderate libertarian. And so we all don't start out perfect, to a radical, to an anarchist. And I've been pretty steady since then. Unfortunately, there are some people who've been here 10 years, maybe not 10 years, but who've been here long enough to mature into libertarianism and who are still actually Republicans. And listen, there's nothing wrong with that, except go be with the Republicans. You know how there's rhinos? There's linos. And we don't need no linos. Just like the Republicans don't need rhinos. The actual libertarians in the Republican Party need to come home. And those of you in the Libertarian Party with your porcupine costumes on, you need to go back to the elephants. Go home if that's where you belong. And if you're in the Republican Party and you're actually a libertarian, come home. There's nothing wrong with either of these things. These aren't meant to me as insults. It's like saying if you're doing a puzzle and you've got the square peg, put it in the square hole, not in the round hole. That's starting to sound filthy. Not trying to go there. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to read through and discuss the philosophy and this argument. And I see, I'm going to put a comment up from Ski2. He says, Wendy McElroy's Demystifying the State turned me anarchist. I have not read that yet. I have not read much Wendy McElroy. I know she's very much against voting. A lot of people like to use the term voluntarist to describe themselves. But from what I understand, the popularizer of that term was Wendy McElroy. And by that, she meant someone who even refused to vote. Didn't she also write something like Bullets and Ballots or something like that on how they were identical? Obviously, I don't agree with her on that point, but that sounds like something that could be fun to read. So I do believe this was written by L. Neil Smith. Little bit of background. L. Neil Smith is a science fiction writer who wrote some libertarian science fiction. So you might want to look it up. There's one that he's really famous for that is like alternative timelines. I wish I had gotten the name of it before I came here. But L. Neil Smith, as he got older, unfortunately was very unwell. He had a stroke. He was in a wheelchair. And at the end, he turned Trumpian. And I blame it on the health conditions. Maybe whatever, because he was such a hardcore anarchist libertarian. To see him turn Trumpian was so freaking sad that I'm blamed. The probability brooch, that's it. Thank you, Ski2. So L. Neil Smith wrote The Probability Brooch, which is one of his more famous works. He also is known, there's a whole other party controversy with L. Neil Smith that I'm not even going to get into, but he also had a very sharp tongue. I'm not going to say the name of the person he said this about because L. Neil Smith has since passed away. There's no sense in reviving old feuds, but there was a certain person that he said, this is just to get, so you know the type of person L. Neil Smith was. He had a sharp tongue. You think I'm sharp-tongued. L. Neil Smith, in speaking about this person, said, I wouldn't walk across the street to spit on him if he was on fire. That is like how L. Neil Smith was. So I blame the stroke for addling his brains, turning him into a Trumpian. In the same way, those of you who are familiar with my Christian journey on how I'm an Orthodox preterist, blame, and there was a great Orthodox preterist book called Days of Vengeance by David Chilton. But David Chilton turned into a hyper-preterist, which is considered a heresy within the church. It's actually considered a damnable heresy within the church. He had a massive heart attack where he was oxygen deprived for a while, and I kind of blame his hyper-preterism on that. Maybe that's just me with some serious copium, because Days of Vengeance was so good. Those of you who know nothing about theology are like, get off the theology, I have no idea what you're talking about. But those of you who are into eschatology are like, oh, I've heard of David Chilton. Okay, so L. Neil Smith, let's get into the article. Let's discuss some philosophy. I'm going to read, though, Thomas Knapp's intro. And yes, I do sip me some cognac while we're having these philosophical discussions. And what's so funny is there's, some of the people who are mad at me in the party watch these shows, which are really long, because they think, like, you're so vain. You probably think this song is about you. They think I'm going to be talking about them, but I'm not, because they're really just not that interesting. I'd rather talk philosophy. And yes, Ski 2, Neil Smith was a Coloradan. He lived in, if I think so, North Colorado. I live more in Southern Colorado. I think he lived more in Northern Colorado. We never did get to meet in person. So here is Tom Knapp's intro. The piece below is one I occasionally like to refer back to an argument, but it seems to have disappeared from the web due to crashes, remodels, and closures of various other sites over the years. And part of that is because it was hosted on L. Neil Smith's site, and he's been gone for a while now. Oh, L. Neil Smith didn't write this. Thomas Knapp did. Now we figured it out. I'm sorry. But it was on L. Neil Smith's site. So Tom says, probably not the best writing job I've ever done. We'll see. I remember when I first read it, I thought it was excellently written, Tom. But we'll see. And you tend to be overly, let's do the Ben Shapiro. You tend to be overly critical of your own writing. Tom Knapp is a great writer. Go visit him at the Garrison Institute. He writes editorials that can be sent to your local papers for publication. Just send it, and he gets published all the time for op-eds, because papers are hungry for material, and it spreads libertarian ideas. So go to the Garrison Institute and check out the things that Tom Knapp has done. Okay, back to normal view. All right, now we're doing the article. It says, Introduction. Should have brought my sword down. Order of battle. Goes, I want to give you some intro as to what was going on in the party in 2010, because you're not going to be able to understand this article without that. What is 2010 really close to? 2006. And that's a good idea, Ski, too. Let's, it's on different screens. So I'd have to put it all on the same screen, but let's try it with a different screen. So if we go here, now I don't know where yeah, I got to put that on the same screen, and then I'll be able to do it right now. I have a little stream deck here that I don't know if you could see, and I'll have to rearrange it, but that's a good idea. So 2006 was the Portland Massacre, and now I am going to make a smart-ass comment. I'm actually, this might be a rather long show, and it's going to be a little bit rambly because it's for the fellow libertarians. And there are some people in the cult, and I already defined the cult earlier as a very small group of people within a larger group of people that I admire. And here's where I'm going to go off on the rabbit trail that maybe only one of you, if I'm lucky, will get. And it's going to show my age. There was a period of time where American Gothic horror movies were really popular. And I would say that was probably the late 70s. And there was an author named Thomas Tryon who wrote a book called Harvest Home. A great American Gothic horror book. If you like that genre, you will love this book. But it got adapted into a TV miniseries, and Bette Davis was in it. It was as the Widow Fortune. It was one of the last roles she was in. Now, I know people laugh at me when I make allusions to things, and I apply things to myself, but the quotes are from actual baddies in the movie. Like when I quote Daenerys Targaryen saying, "break the wheel," when it turned out, she was the problem. That doesn't mean the quote's still not good. like, just because someone who turned out to be a villain said it doesn't mean that the sentiment was bad. So I'm going to be quoting from a baddie in this movie, but I said this to the people in the cult who felt betrayed by me. And one day we're really, really going to talk about this. We really are. Because when it comes to this shit, and we're not talking about anything ethical, legal, anything like that, but when it comes to this kind of shit, Mama knows where the bodies are buried, okay? But anyway, in the movie adaptation, I was in 5th grade. So this is the 70s. I remember my parents like sent me up to the room, and I was like watching through the stairwell because it was supposedly so horrifying. But in the movie adaptation, the TV movie adaptation, go watch it if you can. But again, it's 70s. It was called The Dark Secret of Harvest Home. And it was about this little New England town, I think it was in Maine, called Cornwall Coombe. And this city couple wanted to get away. And they found it so quaint and charming because they kept to the old ways. Like, they wouldn't use tractors. I mean, it wasn't quite Amish, but it was almost like Amish. But it turned out that the village was really a matriarchy that was ran by the secret coven of witches, of which Betty Davis was like the head one. And each year they would choose in this ceremony that just seemed like quaint folksy thing, a Lord of the Harvest. And everyone in the town would help sow their field that year and help out, and like they were super blessed. But it turned out, I think it was on Midsummer's Eve, all the ladies of the town would get together and have this ritual. These are spoilers. I'm giving you spoilers from the 70s. But have this ritual where the corn maiden, who was someone else who was selected, would have a sexual magical ritual with the Lord of the Harvest, after which his throat was cut with a scythe. Okay. So it's a pretty horrible movie, but like just such American Gothic horror. Well, the new city folks that moved in, because they felt they needed new blood there, because everyone had the last name of Penrose. They were all like super, super related. God, I haven't seen this in so long, and I remember all these details. And when Ned, can't remember his last name, figured out what was going on, he had made good friends with the neighbors, the Dodds. And Mr. Dodd was blind, but literally had no eyeballs and was like listening to talking records all day. Okay. Mr. Dodd wasn't born in Cornwall Coombe, but Maggie was. And he married in. Okay. So Ned figures out what's going on, and that Justin Hook, I think was the name of the Lord of the Harvest, that year, he went to Maggie Todd, this lady he made great friends with, and he was like, oh my God, I figured it out. We have to stop this. And this lady he thought he knew so well just stopped and looked at him and said, Ned, you forgot. I was born in the Coombe. In other words, she was telling him that she was part of this old tradition. So what I tended to say to these cultists who are trying to make the Libertarian Party like a satellite of the Republican Party, and they thought I was going to go along with that, I'm like Maggie Dodd going, you forget, I was here before you were. I've been here 10 years. I'm part of the Libertarian wing of the Libertarian Party, not the pretend Republican wing of the Libertarian Party. I was, just like Maggie said, Ned, I was born in the Coombe. Cultists, I've been here way longer than you. And you can do what you want to me, but I ain't letting you. And I'm a determined little bitch. I am not, no matter what you try to throw at me, You're trying to throw removal motions at me again for doing the right thing, like I did in 2021. Ain't gonna stop me, because I'm not going anywhere, because I was born in the Coombe. And I am still proudly a member of the Libertarian wing of the Libertarian Party. So, 2010. What was going on around that time was right after, if you think things are in turmoil now, it was right after what we so dramatically in the Libertarian Party call the Portland Massacre, where we had this really long platform. It was like 40-something pages long. Chuck's in chat. Chuck would remember. And it was in this weird-ass accordion format, whatever. The whole platform got deleted in 2006. And then they slowly rebuilt it. And a lot of people had a lot of resentment over that. L. Neil Smith was one of those people. The person he said he wouldn't walk across the street to spit on to put out a fire if that guy was on fire was one of the architects who's no longer in the party, to my knowledge, of the Portland Massacre. Chuck probably knows who I'm talking about, but we're not going to be mentioning names here. So, this was written during a time of great distress in the party. Kind of like there is now. I'm going to neither confirm nor deny, Chuck, but you know the names of all of you. You and I know names. Oh my God, is it leaking again? I felt a drop of water. So some of these people that are coming into the party, like, it makes me laugh that the chair of Colorado thinks she's the first one to ever come up with the idea of, we're going to unite with the Republicans and agree not to run people in certain races. My sweet summer child, you've been in the party for like 4 years. That shit's been tried over and over again over 50 years. And you think you came up with something new? You think doing scrum on Monday nights is some kind of like, makes you some kind of political genius? Whenever I think, and I do think something's leaking again because I keep feeling water. Whenever I think I've come up with something new, I usually think I'm wrong, because I'm not so arrogant to think out of all the people that came before me, out of all the giants whose shoulders I am standing on, that I come up with something new. You might improve upon something, but generally you aren't that smart, sweetheart, and neither am I. You're not. Like, lay down the braggadocio a little bit. So that's the setting. Very similar to today. So we're talking 2010, 15 years ago. So here's Tom Knapp, who is also, he's been in the party since before me. But I think since it's been 10 years now for me, what's the date today? I just passed my 10-year anniversary. I joined the party, I think it was September 17th, 2014. And we're now near the end of September 2024. So I'm a decader now, baby doll. I feel like I'm new, and I still act like I've only been here a couple years, but I've been here a while. And Chuck lost a bet on how long I'd last. I think a lot of people lost bets on how long I'd last. So, introduction, order of battle. And back then, the terms that were used were rads and prags, the radicals and the pragmatists, or the purists and the pragmatists. So if you hear me say oh, I thought you lost that bet, Chuck. I'm sorry. Chuck's really into betting. I'm never gonna say wrong. Oh, this is a great question here. I'm saving that question to the end. I'm sorry, I promised people I wouldn't go on rabbit trails, but Midwest, listen to the end, but this might be a while. I will answer that. So here's Tom. If we place the ongoing purist-pragmatist conflict within the libertarian movement under a metaphorical microscope, it immediately becomes, these glasses are like too strong, to be good, where it's like slightly just not good. So if you're seeing me go like this or squinting, that's why they're not really the right reading prescription, it immediately becomes apparent that what we're looking at is not one conflict, but a bundle of conflicts composed of numerous intertwined disputes with overlapping intra-movement constituencies for particular outcomes. While the movement can be reasonably viewed as a split overall between purists and pragmatist camps, the vast no man's land between them is a constantly swirling milieu in which it's not always perfectly clear who is shooting at whom or why. Various constituencies raise their flags over specific coordinates and give battle, hoping to temporarily claim some patch of territory for their concern of the moment, or perhaps to extend the lines of some larger alliance to encompass more of the disputed field. I'm sorry, Tom, this is good writing. This is good writing. The hill upon which I intend to raise my flag, the banner of the purist faction, and I do still consider myself a Zen. I'm a radical. I've been a radical now since 2017. I've been an anarchist since, no, it hasn't been 2016. It's been less than that. It took me 10 months. I joined September 2015. I've been an anarchist since July of 2015. Anyway, the banner of the purist faction, broadly defined in this paper, encompasses the notion of incrementalism. Whoever controls that hill, in turn, overlooks and may exploit a key route across the plains of realpolitik. May, I say, or might. The incrementalist high ground has been occupied for some time, and without substantial opposition, by pragmatist forces, which have declined to actually sally forth versus the state, preferring instead to simply occupy it, what we today would call regime libertarians. Hold a few grandiose parades on its slopes. I don't know, like bragging that you might get a cabinet position, and to deny its use to purists who might actually use it as a base from which to strike real blows for liberty. However, it has come to my attention of late that this hill is only weakly occupied. Weakly meaning as in not strongly, not weekly as in every 7 days. Its garrison's composition greatly resembles that of a Confederate Home Guard militia regiment during the late unpleasantness, as described by an inspecting general. 3 field officers, 4 staff officers, 10 captains, 30 lieutenants, and 1 private with a misery in his bowels. To put it bluntly, for all their guff about holding the heights over the plane of realpolitik, and we hear that today, it's realpolitik for us to support Donald Trump. He's going to give us a cabinet position, and he's going to free Ross Ulbricht. He could have done that when he was there the first time. And maybe he'll do both those things. And I won't turn my nose up at them, but I won't kiss his ass either. His orange ass can kiss my libertarian ass. The pragmatist garrison, which had at its disposal the heavy artillery of genuine incrementalism, had it cared to use it, chose to mothball that formidable weapon and instead field a lighter piece of shorter range and minimal power, one more suited to twirling, slapping, and shouldering its ceremonies, held for the purpose of congratulating themselves on their superior political acumen than for actual use in battle. The pop gun I refer to is, of course, compromise. The hill is, in other words, ripe for a bayonet charge. And I hope in 2026, the libertarian wing of the Libertarian Party, and I'm not referring to the radical caucus, I'm referring to those of us that are hardcore libertarian to our bones. Because I'm done with caucus shit. It's occupied by troops who are not interested in fighting and who, if forced to, have at their disposal a weapon guaranteed to fizzle half the time an episode and explode in its firer's face. The other half, it is the purists, unabashed and uncompromising libertarians who may differ on how far to go, but know which way they're going, who have a rightful claim to, and know how best to exploit the advantages of an incremental approach. Forward march. Now, I know some people will think kissing Republican ass is the way forward. No, it isn't. Compromise with the enemy in that way. What was that Julia Roberts film, Sleeping with the Enemy? Sleeping with the enemy is not the way. There's a reason why the phrase, you lay down with dogs and you get up with fleas, has survived the test of time. Next title, The Fight That Never Was. Incrementalism versus abolitionism. I'm an abolitionist. Things are not always what they seem. For years, pragmatist reformers in the libertarian movement have exercised a virtual monopoly on advocacy of incrementalism, caricaturing purist abolitionism as its mutually exclusive opposite. Even a cursory examination of the two concepts, however, reveals that this is not necessarily the case. Incrementalism involves setting and achieving incremental goals, taking baby steps in one's chosen direction. Incrementalism is a proposed means. And I'm sure some are saying, well, that's what we're saying, right? But you also got to take into consideration Nozikian side constraints. And one of those side constraints is, I don't know, you don't get into bed with Donald Trump. Gross. Abolitionism is the notion that wrongs should be abolished rather than simply minimized. And at the abstract anarchist extreme, no insult intended, that happens to be where I am myself, that all wrongs must be abolished in order for the abolitionist to claim victory. Abolition is a proposed end or set of ends. It is certainly possible to conclude, and some purists do, that limiting issues advocacy to abolition and only abolition is an appropriate means, and perhaps even the only appropriate means to achieve abolitionist ends. I happen to be one of those people. I don't believe it's the only appropriate way, but I think it's the most effective way. I'll take a baby step if you want to give it to me, which is why I said I'm not going to cry, obviously, if we get a libertarian in a cabinet position, and certainly I'm going to rejoice if Ross Ulbricht is freed. But I don't think those types of strategies are the way. I'm a purist abolitionist. I think change, real change, happens rapidly and suddenly. Now, I'll take the baby steps around, along the way, but I ain't making the Libertarian Party about that. I almost said something super filthy. Pragmatists, in turn, have exploited the possibility of such a reification of abstract end into concrete means by encouraging the erroneous conclusion that reification is universal within and necessary to purism. They create two useful and reciprocally dependent misimpressions. This is a very well-written article, Tom. I don't know why you sold yourself short. Number one, that incrementalist means are not available to purists. Two, that incrementalist means are therefore only available to pragmatists. Wrong. I consider the claim that Alan R. Weiss is a purist and an abolitionist to be indisputable. He described, and I don't even know who that is, to be honest with you. He describes himself as an anarcho-libertarian. He writes for purist publications, including Rational Review and the Libertarian Enterprise, and he has a long record of continuous association with purist associations and projects. In 2002, Weiss was elected to the Northwest Austin, Texas, #1 Municipal Utility Board. During his tenure on that board, he led a successful effort to reduce taxes associated with its operations by 50%, and then he resigned. In other words, he used incremental means, seeking and gaining electoral office, to accomplish an incremental objective, citing a particular tax rather than cutting a particular tax, rather than eliminating that tax or all taxation. Even though his strong preference would have been, and his ultimate goal is, the elimination of both the board to which he was elected and the retention by government of that board's powers. If you don't think I'm a purist and an abolitionist, then you haven't been paying attention. I have personally engaged in incremental political action numerous times. I'd like to eliminate the U.S. government. Having so far been able to figure out a way to do so, I serve as an appointed member of a federal board so that I can affect its operations in a pro-freedom way. I'd like to eliminate my city's government. Having so far been unable to figure out a way to do so, I have personally managed 2 winning campaigns to keep one of its public offices, city marshal, elected rather than appointed, and another winning campaign to elect a person, Tamara Millay, to serve in that office, who discharged the duties of that office in a more liberty-friendly way than others might have been expected to. Now that seems to support this whole, well, why don't we just support Donald Trump type of thing. There are some compromises you don't make. If you can do it in an incrementalist libertarian fashion, more power to you. I ran a serious run for town council. I wouldn't have been able to get rid of every tax in Castle Rock. But what I would have been able to do is vote no on every single one, even the ones that would have passed. Mark Montoni used to serve, and he's as purist as they come. Mark Montoni used to serve on a board, a 17-person board. I forgot what kind of municipal board it was. And he said the votes were almost nearly 16-1. And he said that one no meant he was doing his job. QED. Incrementalist means are not only available to purists and abolitionists, but used by them, and are therefore not only available to pragmatists. Time to take another sip of cognac. Sadly, this issue should never have required the current argument. The de facto pragmatist monopoly on incrementalism and their use of it as an anti-purist cudgel, and we've seen a lot of anti-purism coming out of some prominent leaders within the party who are supposed anarchists lately. Oh, you guys are just purists. No, I'll take an incremental means. But, you know, that old joke, would you sleep with me for $10? No. Would you sleep with me for $1 million? Yes. What about $100? What do you think I am, a prostitute? And the guy says, we already established you are. Now we're just negotiating the price. Okay. So, nearly 30 years ago, purist icon Murray Rothbard, the boogeyman of the pragmatist, was already explicitly endorsing incrementalism. It is legitimate and proper to advocate transition demands as way stations along the road to victory, provided that the ultimate goal of victory is always kept in mind and held aloft. And I think he used to say, hold aloft the banner of purism, or the banner of pure libertarianism. In this way, the ultimate goal is clear and not lost sight of, and the pressure is kept on so that transitional or partial victories will feed on themselves rather than appease or weaken the ultimate drive of the movement. Catering to Republicans will weaken the movement. Must the libertarian necessarily confine himself to advocating immediate abolition? Are transitional demands, steps towards liberty and practice, therefore illegitimate? Of course they're not. As long as you're not betraying by sleeping with the devil. Surely not. Since realistically, there would then be no hope of achieving the final goal. I actually don't believe that sentence, and I don't know if Tom does either. Because I do, again, I think it's, what's his last name? Robin, who wears the red velvet jacket, who used to do libertarian presentations all the time, who talked about the most current research on how social change happens very rapidly. And not incrementally. Sometimes obviously it does at times incrementally. Why'd the light go off on this thing? My little light went off. Aw, that's sad. This is an antique, so it could be that the light bulb itself is just broken, or it could be that the socket is bad. I'm going to have Wayne look at it. Wayne can fix anything. It says, surely not. Since realistically, there would then be no hope of achieving the final goal. It is therefore incumbent upon the libertarian, eager to achieve his goal as rapidly as possible, to push the polity ever further in the direction of that goal. I agree with that. But you have to be careful in how you do it. Oh, he goes on to say that. Clearly, such a course is difficult, for the danger always exists of losing sight of, or even undercutting, the ultimate goal of liberty. But such, of course, given the state of the world in the past, present, and foreseeable future, is vital if the victory of liberty is ever to be achieved. And those are both quotes from Murray Rothbard. Not only do purists have a rightful claim to incrementalist means, which again, great, if you can, without having to kiss ass, convince a sitting president, no matter who it is, to appoint a libertarian to a crucial role, great. But you don't sell out the libertarian candidate to do that. You don't put on a clown nose and get in, loser, we're here to defeat Biden. This was before, it became obvious that was Weekend at Bernie's. Not only do purists have a rightful claim to incrementalist means, but as we shall see next, pragmatists have severely undermined their own claim to those means by attempting to smuggle other unsupportable means into play under the rubric of incrementalism. Next subtitle, Compromise, the Poverty of Pragmatism. As we've previously seen, there's no real defensible pragmatist monopoly on incrementalism. That the pragmatists have postured as the possessors of such a monopoly raises the question of why they are so interested in controlling that term and denying its use to purists, or radicals, as we'd say today. The obvious answer is that incrementalism is a visibly worthy political tool. That's why I ran for office. Insofar as the pragmatist-purist feud manifests itself in demonstrations, or at least protestations of the efficacy and success, with the intent of recruiting libertarian newcomers to one side or the other, the side which can even falsely claim sole possession of such a tool benefits. That there are less obvious answers is, well, less obvious. I love that sentence. However, there's a good reason to believe that less obvious answers exist. Hey, Court, how you doing? Just saying hi to people in chat. Assertion of a monopoly on incrementalism is simply not strictly necessary for the purpose of demonstrating efficacy and success. Such a purpose could be more effectively fulfilled by using incrementalism to build a record of electing public officials, libertarian public officials, and electing them, winning referendum votes, and then stacking up the results versus those achieved by the allegedly incrementalist deprived purists for comparison. That means there's another article I need to read by Mark Montoni. Mark Montoni wrote a great article entitled, "Why Compromise If You're Not Going to Win?" If it's a race you're in, you know you're not going to win, why pander? Why not hold aloft the banner of pure libertarianism to get the word out? Why pander? Why stoop? Why drop your drawers if you're not going to even win? So I forgot where I was at now. The pragmatists have avoided any such comparison. Not only because it would explode their pretensions to a monopoly on incrementalism, but because it would explode their implicit claim that they use incrementalism effectively or that matter at all. The pragmatists have effectively used incrementalism as an advocacy cudgel in intra-movement disputes, but evidence that they've used it in real politics is sorely lacking. The pragmatist case for primacy in the libertarian movement is a hodgepodge of horror stories about purist failure, and I think we saw what Javier Milei, like, he was no incrementalist, a fuero. That can be, failure in grandiose projects of future victories, which can be achieved only after the purists have been swept aside. What's missing from that case is a portfolio of pragmatist successes. We did this and it worked. So for all the talk today of, oh, we're going to compromise with the Republicans, and we're going to get this, and we're going to get that, this article goes to show you this strategy, and the light just came back on, has been tried. You are not talking about anything new. This is an ongoing debate since the beginning of the party. And I would encourage, because when you're reading bylaws, you have to read them. I often say bylaws are a forensic document of institutional trauma. Usually something was inserted into them because of an event that happened that people wanted to make sure didn't happen again. But they can't foresee every possible one. So more additions accrete on like barnacles. But this whole idea of being a distinct political entity, and I'm not saying this with any disrespect to the current JC members, but I think they got that last decision horribly wrong because they were reading it in isolation. They were not reading it within the context of the history of the Libertarian Party. Can't possibly understand why that was added. It was added precisely because of analogs to the situations that we're finding ourselves in right now. Why would a movement assert a fake monopoly on a tool it doesn't even use? Why would it insist, contrary to fact and evidence, that its opponents don't have that tool in their kit, even those opponents that have visibly and successfully used the tool numerous times? And why would it refuse to take that tool out of its own kit and visibly use it to tighten some bolts or drive some nails? I will give some credit to architects of some things that are going on now. I obviously think it is, I'm trying to think of the right word, like, I can't even think of the right level of foulness that I think it is to fundraise for Donald Trump. But I will give them credit that they are trying to get libertarians in certain positions to try to make certain changes. I just don't believe in betraying our actual candidate to do that. But getting libertarians into positions where they can influence things. Obviously, that's a worthy goal. Who would be against that? They try to paint it as you're being against that, and that's not it. It's that the ends do not justify the means. The answer is that the pragmatist version of incrementalism is a counterfeit tool. Its dark silhouette against the bottom of the toolbox drawer looks and form like the genuine article. But when pulled out and examined closely, it turns out to be a dropped, forged in Pakistan fake. Deep down in their pockets, next to the receipt for $4.95, the pragmatists know that their tool, compromise, won't turn a bolt. And they know that if they pull out their shoddy instrument and hold it up next to the purest version, nobody will want to turn a bolt, will select theirs. As defined above, incrementalism involves setting and achieving incremental goals, taking baby steps in the right direction. Compromise, on the other hand, involves trading steps in the wrong direction, like fundraising for somebody that wants to raise tariffs and make flag burning a felony, and all kinds of other anti-libertarian positions. Like before, when people were having like this weird ass fetish with RFK Jr., who wanted to like nationalize babysitting. It's crazy. Anyway, sorry, got going. Involves trading steps in the wrong direction for other steps in the right direction. So we'll give you these bad things. We'll pretend you don't believe these bad things if you give us this one good thing. That's not the way you do it. The Republicans pull this trick all the time. So they'll say, the Democrats wanted to raise taxes by 30%, but we got it so that they were only raised 10%. Aren't we wonderful? We lowered your taxes by 20%. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. You raised them by 10. You kept them by being raised another 20, but you took steps in the wrong direction. When they wanted to raise them by 30, you should have demanded that they get reduced by 50 and then settle on 15. That would have been a victory in the right direction. Okay. So, where did I leave off? That suspicion is well-founded, for as I shall demonstrate below, compromise destroys rather than augments the utility of incrementalism. To put a finer point on it, the inclusion of compromise as a means in libertarian strategy requires a radical and unquantifiable redefinition of ends. So, the next title is Compromise's Calculation Problem. In the larger libertarian movement, the difficult question of end states is a constant topic of discussion. Anarchist and minarchist factions do daily battle over the propriety of particular and general long-term goals. As a practical matter, however, the discussion has been framed in terms of how to deal with a problem we'll have to deal with later. The anarchist who wants to abolish the state entirely may disagree with the minarchist who wants to retain an ultra-minimal night watchman state, but they are able to coexist beneath the libertarian umbrella because their goals are, for the most part, it's a word I don't know. Commensurable. I don't know that word. I think I could guess what it means from the context, but I don't think I've ever even seen that. Well, I obviously have since I've read this article before. I think I read it differently, though. So it's commensurable. It means measurable by the same standard. I'd never heard that word. That's a good word. While the minarchist might cut government size, scope, or power in a particular area by 80%, where I want to get back to the screen where I can see where I'm doing, where the anarchists would cut it by 100%. Both agree pretty much every function of government should be slashed significantly. Let me just try this again just to have some fun with Bunchy. He's got to get in there every once in a while. Okay. Even if we posit a bigger libertarian umbrella, under which other additional groups might cluster, that commensurability, I like that word. I don't think I'm going to remember it, though. It's pretty self-couth, which is another uncommon word, which means uncommon. The geo-libertarian and the constitutionalists might make exceptions, and that they are, in that which they subject to libertarian measurement. But those exceptions are defined exceptions. The constitutionalists may advocate a specific level of taxation for the specific purpose of providing for the common defense. The geo-libertarian might argue that a community ground rent is not taxation as normally defined, and so on and so forth. One day I need to do a whole show on my opposition to geo-libertarianism. One reason why I don't is I find that geo-libertarians are more obsessive than Jehovah's Witnesses that you've given 5 minutes to. Like, you'll get the Watchtower in the mail for the rest of your life. Geo-libertarians are some of the most obsessive people I've ever met in my entire life. And if I do one show on them, they will haunt me to the end of my days. You can't just disagree. Like, there's plenty of minarchists that are in my chat all the time. They know I'm an anarchist. We have our little spats. We move on. We don't, obsess upon it till the end of time. Don't ever get in a debate with a Georgist. That's all I can say. Oh, my God. I'm telling you, I'd rather debate the Trinity with a bunch of Jehovah's Witnesses. I could think... Or as I said about voting for supporting Trump, that I'd rather eat my own foot out of a bear trap. These kinds of exceptions may be problematic, and they may raise questions as to which groups truly belong under the metaphorical umbrella, or just exactly which piece of ground falls or should fall under that umbrella's shade. What they don't, however, is make it impossible to answer those questions. Yeah, and look, everybody agrees with me. Anyone who's not a geo-libertarian agrees with this. You get bullied online more by that particular group than any other type in the movement. That's been my experience for 10 years, and is why I avoid the subject, even though I am pyrotechnically opposed to geo-libertarianism. Me just saying that now, they're probably going to haunt me forever. Watch in the comments. Now that I said that, maybe they won't, just to spite me, but if I didn't, it would just be full of geo-libertarians going, Jaime Ammerman did this, or have you read that, and don't you know that David Nolan was a geo-libertarian, which is a lie. I think maybe I'm gonna have to do a show on this, because they misrepresent David Nolan on that by saying that he favored a land tax. No, he didn't. He just said that if we have to have taxation, he thinks that's the least destructive of all taxes. That's like me saying, if I've got 50 piles of dog shit in front of me, one of the 50 smells a little less dog shitty than the rest of them. That's not a ringing endorsement, and it certainly doesn't mean that I am a fan of piles of dog shit. Okay? Never mind. When compromise is introduced into a libertarian strategy, however, the quality of commensurability disappears, and with it the ability to define any particular end, let alone any end state, as compatible or incompatible with libertarianism per se. More specifically, the pragmatist justification for compromise relies upon the adoption of non-measurable or non-quantifiable goals, while Pro-compromise pragmatists are understandably shy about explaining their reasons for advocating something they don't want to admit they are advocating. Some cues and clues are available. When pragmatist Brian Holtz states that he stands for minimizing the overall incidence of coercion, or implicitly characterizes himself in contrast to someone else as advocating the policies and tactics that have the highest expected value in terms of minimizing the net amount of aggression suffered by humanity, we should pay close attention to exactly to what he's saying. And that is what is going on now, just under different clothing, under paleo-libertarian clothing. Ditto when Carl Milstead, which is a name that came up earlier in chat, the head of the Libertarian Reform Caucus, asks, why should I never endorse an action that employing aggression, and then it says sick because he worded it weird, even if it results in a substantial net reduction in aggression. So let me just rephrase this so you get where Tom's coming from, because the current conversation hasn't been framed this way. But what those folks back then were saying is there's like this big pile of aggression, undifferentiated aggression. And if you can slightly reduce it in this one area, even if you have to increase it over here, it's worth it. Because this little bit that you can reduce here is worth more than the bit you have to increase over there. Fair tax proponents are the more modern people that are most guilty of this. For the sake of uniformity, I'll refer to the goal which Mr. Holtz and Dr. Milstead implicitly hold out for adoption as reduced overall net aggression. It's a fine-sounding goal, and one to which an approach of compromise lends itself well. Unfortunately, it's also utterly impossible in most cases to determine whether and to what degree such a goal has actually been achieved. Mr. Holtz and Dr. Milstead meet Dr. Mises. Judgments of value do not measure. They merely establish grades and scales. Even Robinson Crusoe, when he has to make a decision where no ready judgment of value appears, and where he has to construct one upon the basis of a more or less exact estimate, cannot operate solely with subjective use value, but must take into consideration the intersubstitutability that was a word, of goods on the basis of which he can form his estimates. In such circumstances, it will be impossible for him to refer all things back to one unit. Rather will he, so far as he can, refer all the elements which have to be taken into account in informing his estimate to those economic goods which can be apprehended by an obvious judgment of value. That is to say, goods of a lower order and paying cost. That this is only possible in very simple conditions is obvious. In the case of more complicated and more lengthy processes of production, it will plainly not answer. So, there's too many moving parts here. History isn't all of one piece, just like the example I gave before of the butterfly effect. The notion of reduced overall net aggression requires a system for classifying all of aggression's varying forms into commensurable units. It is relatively non-controversial to assert that picking a pocket is less onerous than assault, which is in turn less onerous than murder. But unitizing these forms of aggression for bulk comparison is a different story entirely. Does it take 2.5 armed robberies to equal a rape, or 3.1? Even when aggression is nominally measurable in known units, it's not necessarily true that the factor of aggression itself will be perceived or valued in terms of those units. If I can reduce the taxes of person A by $2 in trade for raising the taxes of person B by only $1, is that a net reduction in overall aggression? What if person A's $2 would have otherwise been spent on country club initiation fees, while person B's $1 would have been otherwise been spent buying food for his starving child? Would the decrease in aggression versus person A truly be commensurate with the increase in aggression versus person B? The value of $1 may be uniform for certain purposes, but it is highly subjective for most. Most people would agree that stealing a piece of... Let me read this sentence again. Most people would agree that stealing a piece of 18 holes on the golf course is less onerous than stealing a baby's bottle of milk, even if the dollar values of the two say otherwise. Even leaving such questions aside, precisely why should person A accept an obligation to be aggressed against more so that person B will be aggressed against less? So in that question, while I am firmly and absolutely in support of the release of Ross Ulbricht, why should we accept all of Trump's absolutely aggressive policies in exchange for that? Because the one maybe is achievable? Well, maybe it's achievable by other ways. But why should those of us who do not want to tolerate that other aggression feel like we're somehow wrong for protesting this? We're going to start that paragraph again. Even leaving such questions aside, precisely why should person A accept an obligation to be aggressed against more so that person B will be aggressed against less, specious overall net claims notwithstanding? Under what moral calculus should anyone be considered fair game for aggression in any amount? Which is why the Libertarian Party has to advocate for libertarian candidates that will not increase aggression anywhere. Not some incommensurable, now that I know that word, net aggression. The idea that some central pragmatist libertarian planning board could accurately forecast aggregate increases and reductions in the various forms of aggression spawned by particular policy compromises and compare them to reveal what actions would produce reduced overall net aggression is pure, well, I was going to say science fiction, but no science fiction author I know would touch the idea with a 10-foot pole. Sapient, spacefaring, beer-drinking anarchist squid are one thing, but there's a limit to the suspension of disbelief. The commensurable characteristic which unifies libertarianism, however narrowly or broadly defined, is opposition to, not redistribution of, aggression. Assuming the burden of aggression redistribution would rip the fabric of the libertarian umbrella. Treating aggression as a commensurable, tradable commodity would mean that some factions would be required to accept increased aggression on issues dear to them, like, I don't know, tariffs, in order to pay for the decreased aggression in areas held dear by other factions, such as the release of Ross Ulbricht. No libertarian coalition could hold together under such stressors. It would fall to pieces as soon as the compromisers traded an increase in the top tax rate for legalization of marijuana or vice versa or whatever. You can tell this is an old article since marijuana legalization, Colorado, yay. But we could substitute some more current issue here. A single focus on institutionalized aggression, i.e., the aggression of the state, and a proposed solution of reducing, never in any case increasing, the ability of the state to aggress, are indispensable to the success, nay, the survival of any broad-based libertarian political movement. Pragmatism is popularly defined as an emphasis on that which works. Compromise does not and cannot work in the context of a libertarian political movement. This is my original podcasting mic, if you're wondering why I feel free to do mic drops on an actual real XLR mic. I don't know if you can hear the pieces rattling around in here, but this thing is like, oh my God, it's really rattling around. When I used to do the Preterist podcast, let me see if I can do my old podcasting voice. This podcast was made on a Macintosh, as if I'd use anything else. Anyone who's familiar with the Preterist podcast will go, oh my God, that's the old D.D. Warren voice. I should play my podcasting voice one day. It's totally different. Then I'm gonna see if we could find a clip on YouTube at the end when I tell everyone, since we're done with the article, now we're on personal stuff. Let me see if I can find a clip of my old podcasting voice. I used to have quite the radio voice in the past because I was a very, very early podcaster. And I know there are some old episodes of the Preterist podcast on YouTube, or at least there used to be. Let's look up Preterist podcast under the pseudonym I used to use, which people laugh at me about, but I used to have to use it because my ex was a cop. Here we go. We're going to, for a moment, see if we can find some of my my old. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of me on here. But let's see here. It's a short summary of preterism by D.D. Warren. So let's hear my old podcasting voice.
Last episode, I promised that this time I would give...
Okay, one second. My computer, it's not showing. It's not, for some reason, is it on mute? No, it's not on mute. I do not know why it's not playing. Maybe if we put my other mic in front of my computer mics, you can hear it a little bit, but you will hear my old podcasting voice. We'll play this, and I'll mute my main mic and put up the volume on the other mic.
A very brief outline of what Orthodox preterism is, and to give some very basic reasons for why I hold that particular position. Are you sure you are ready? What you're about to hear may change your entire perspective about the end times and biblical prophecy. You may also desire to switch to a Mac. Or you may just end up thinking that I'm a first-rate nutbar. Or maybe all of the above. Okay, deep
All right,
breath now.
let's go to the end here. See if I do my
Orthodox preterism is the
Max
position.
thing.
You see, introduction. Welcome to my world. So, next episode, I will be getting a bit more into terminology and why it matters. Until next time.
Dr. Tim LaHaye and Jerry B. Jenkins are America's favorite authors of the apocalypse. They're Left Behind novels, which take biblical prophecies about the end of the world, translate them into fiction. You simply cannot put them down. They really are page turners.
Please note that in case of rapture, this podcast will be left unmanned.
Okay, it didn't have my... This podcast was made on a Macintosh, but that was my signature at the time. Now, let me turn this off. But as you can tell, I had a little bit of a different intonation then because, again, I was a very prolific podcaster back in the day. So anyway, so let's go now to the personal questions that I said I would save to the end if there were any. The Princess said, would you ever do any debates or open panels? Yes, I would. It would depend, though, on the subject and the other participants. I actually don't enjoy debating, despite the fact that I was basically a debater for 15 years and owned a debate forum. I break out in hives in debates and sometimes cry because I'm a big crybaby. So as Melanie Martinez would say, cry baby, but you can't hold the tears. Yeah, I'm definitely a crybaby. But depending on who it was, yes, I would. And I did a debate. If those of you who might remember the Unbelievable podcast with Justin Brierley, from England, was a very popular apologetics podcast. There was an episode with me where I just completely demolished this one pastor who didn't know what was coming to him. I was like, so basically what you're saying is wherever you go, there you are. So anyway. So yes, that's the answer to that question. I would gladly do a show with Larry Sharp. We're good friends. I'm sure he would do one with me as well. And Skitu, it's preterist, so it's meaning the past. Preterist. So, going back, I know Gennaro said, I would consider myself a liberal, but not a liberal in the sense of a modern libertarian. I don't think modern libertarians are liberals. I have a bunch of shows I did on why classical liberalism is not the same as libertarianism. I do think we're kissing cousins, and they should be fully welcome in the Libertarian Party, but that the Libertarian Party itself is not classically liberal. What exactly does paleo-libertarianism entail? That's one of those terms that does become difficult to define. What I mean is a mixing of conservative values to past the point of being just a mere preference. Because obviously, as a libertarian, you could prefer personally and freely a more traditional or conservative lifestyle, but you get to the point to where you are pushing out people out of the movement and only recruiting people into the movement that agree with your conservative values. That's the way I loosely use it. Other people may mean something different. It is good to define terms. Okay, let's see. What else? What commensurable? I need to keep using that word. Let's see. Nathan would like a link to this article. The gain on my mic is extremely high. I wish I saw that earlier. Hopefully, is this better? Is this better? It's not going into the red, but let me know if this gain is any better. And I'm sorry if my voice was getting a bit blown out. Maybe as a little too close or a little too excitable. Okay, so let me go up here. I don't think there was any other personal question. Oh, Midwest K Mixes asks, if I do an episode on the whole ballot access in Guam and Puerto Rico situation, I don't know anything about it. I would if I knew. The person probably that one day maybe I should ask as a guest on that would be Bill Redpath or Richard Winger. They would be the best people to know. And if you go to Ballot Access News on the internet and search Guam and Puerto Rico, you will probably get a ton of information. I do know there was a Libertarian Party in Puerto Rico for a while, because in the archives we do have some of their newsletters. Okay, I think that's it. I need to buy the probability brooch. All right, that is it for this evening. Let's, I'm sorry, I still again am not entirely with it. You know, when you've been put out, I don't recover well. It usually takes me a little while, and I'll be traveling tomorrow. So I hope you all have a good night. My hopes, and I did test out some microphones that I had, is to maybe, I'm not that good at the just like approaching strangers and doing the man on the street type interviews, but I hope to do a couple at the Rage Against the War Machine. And I don't know if I'll be able to stream them live. I probably have to bring it back to the hotel room and edit it, but I hope to do a couple, and not with libertarians, with strangers, but we'll see. I know people think I'm an extrovert, but I'm really not. But we'll see if I can do it. If I can do it, if I can get myself up the guts to do it, I'll do it. Okay, everyone, I hope you have an awesome night, and I hope that article helped you along your libertarian journey. It was instrumental in mine. Have a good night.
You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business, not because they want to